you're on Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. We're here in Paris at the Trocadéro, at the Cité de l'Architecture et du Patrimoine, among the exceptional pieces of the Kinshasa Chronicles exhibition in the absence of visitors due to the lockdown measures. A tribute to Kin, the Congolese capital, and to the artistic creativity of its people for our last program of the year. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. Our guests had well scrutinized the year 2020, a year marked by the COVID-19 pandemic, terrorism, but also Africa's extraordinary ability to adapt and innovate. We find some of our guests, George Rubello Pinto Chikoti, Aisha Abubakar Ashanu, Nyagale Bagayoko, and John Nengasong.
It is a disease like any other disease. We have to work closely, do not stigmatize, do not discriminate people because of that. We will come out of this strong.
Adapt or perish, this is the choice of these Cameroonian companies determined not to be ruined by the impact of COVID-19.
We have developed 3 samples of hand washers which operate mainly with push pedals. Manual contact with the tap, which in our view poses an additional risk, has been completely eliminated.
Millions of small arms in circulation on the continent have triggered an explosion of crime figures. Spotlight in Tanzania, the country that says no to violence against civilians.
This one is a military weapon, highly dangerous to the public. It can carry 30 rounds of ammunition.
We head for Cameroon to meet those who did everything not to let themselves be overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic. These Cameroonian companies have decided to fight in their own way against the stagnation that threatens their activities. Innovation and reconversion are the key words for these startups standing up against their economic fate. Cleaning, hand washing systems or masks, everything is good so as not to lose ground while waiting for the end of the pandemic. Our journalist Emmanuel Abena Otu went to meet them. Take a look.
Disinfection, production of automated hand washers or masks. In Yaoundé, the COVID-19 crisis has awakened the business instincts of several entrepreneurs. While the national public authorities have set up 13 health measures, several economic operators have come up with brilliant ideas of capitalizing on the potential of these barrier measures. The objective, create various income-generating activities, responding to the health imperatives of this unprecedented crisis. In the Mbalawan Dragage district, agents in the middle of a disinfection operation now have an exclusive contract with this major printing company. At regular intervals, they track all the undesirables, scour the door handles and seats, and all the surfaces accessible by the personnel and the users. However, this was not originally the primary mission of this real estate company. We are mainly in rental business of furnished apartments. Our main target is usually an expatriate, those who come for a short stay, who want a comfortable place. As part of GIP Apart, in fact, we had industrial cleaning services, high-end cleaning services for offices, conference rooms that are rented and for furnished apartments. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic, we were forced to extend our service to all those who have office premises, such as state institutions or even international institutions. A transformation that benefits companies seeking to ensure the safety of their premises or other spaces in order to protect their employees and customers. We have asked GIP Clean to support us, clean up our spaces, protecting and preserving the health of our employees and the customers in our premises. We are satisfied with the services of GIP Clean, as the products they use are environmentally friendly. And on a different note, they bring us great added value in terms of counseling. The economic situation seems to herald an increased development of these activities within the hygiene and sanitation department of GIP Apart. The cleaning aspect has become a rapidly developing side of the business. You can imagine the demand during this COVID-19 period. We have to respond. And since we already had the necessary equipment for interior cleaning for our real estate clients, we extended it so that everyone could benefit from it. So it's really become a premium service for our business. Cameroon Eco Building Solutions has had a similar reflex to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. The group of young Cameroonian engineers has been offering robot prototypes and alternatives that are accessible to small entrepreneurs for about 3 years. For example, this electric clay bricklaying machine produces 1,000 pieces per hour, or this machine used for packaging and automatic distribution of agricultural products. But today, on the sidewalks of the Tsinga district and relying on a fragile technical park, they are facing a health emergency. CEBS, the Cameroon Eco Building Solutions, specializes in the production of agro-industrial machines and the manufacturing of brick production machines. So, as part of the country's fight against the coronavirus, we decided it was good to stop the usual manufacturing and get on with the development of hand washers. We have developed 3 samples of hand washers, which operate mainly with push pedals. Manual contact with the tap, which in our view poses an additional risk, has been completely eliminated. The hand washer sells at 75,000 CFA francs. Its production costs run to 55,000 CFA francs per unit. But to meet the high demand, the small factory has decided to make the equipment manufacturing process free for the general public. African entrepreneurship has an opportunity to reinvent the concept of Made in Africa during the health crisis. In this case, made in Cameroon. The key is to think local. Another example is Solange, which recently associated with JB de Londres, a DJ and promoter of a startup specialized in communication and digital creation. The first cases of COVID-19 were reported in Cameroon. Solange has been running at full production capacity of 150 face masks a day. Today, JB will receive 500 masks from its business partner in the Bastos district. Ovid Design is a communication agency. We are in visual communications. Facing the shortage of masks, we've specialized in the manufacture of cloth masks. We've also put a lining inside, a second layer, a filter. And this is what also makes this mask special. We try to work mainly with companies. It means that we can produce larger quantities. In this anxiety-provoking business climate, Cameroonian entrepreneurs are trying to demonstrate their capacity for adjustment and resilience. How the country's overall economy will react is uncertain. According to the Central African Economic and Monetary Commission, Cameroon's economic growth should drop by only 0.2% in the event of a transient COVID-19 crisis. But the pessimistic scenario forecasts a slowdown of 3% by the end of the year, if the effects of the pandemic prove to be more severe for the region.
As I mentioned earlier, our guests over the past few months have scrutinized the news for you, and in particular the consequences of the arrival in Africa of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Brussels, George Rubello Pinto Chikoti, Secretary General of the OACPS, the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, entrusted François Baudry with his analysis of the consequences for the economies of the continent. And in Lagos, Aisha Abubakar Ashinu, a Nigerian textile entrepreneur, told our reporter Hugo Yoana how the pandemic had affected her, but also strengthened her entrepreneurial determination. Listen to her.
Yes, indeed. The COVID-19 did upset my program as Secretary General of the ACP, as I had, in the first days, launched a plan that I was supposed to execute. But in fact, I had to change everything the following week due to the lockdown. And the situation is not really good, not at all actually, because most countries have been affected not only by the disease, but by the measures they have had to take to contain the disease, and hence the lockdown. All the measures that prevented people from moving around and that prevented production. So there are cases where people have starved to death. And for economies that depend on tourism and imports, they cannot restart that easily. So all the regions that I represent in the OEACP, the Caribbean, African and the Pacific regions, the situation is dire.
Au Pacifique, effectivement, la situation est lamentable.
What role can your organization play in this context?
Effectivement, nous avons,
within the framework of the agreements that we have with the European Union, we were able to mobilize approximately $214 million, which was distributed over all the countries, both to provide a response to the COVID-19 crisis, but also to meet other important needs in most of these countries. So I think it affects us deeply. But thanks to this agreement, which we have with the European Union, we have been able to mobilize a lot of money over such a short period of time.
Aisha Abubakar Chono, you are the CEO of Fashion Spaces Garment Factory, and your company has been on the front line providing masks and equipment during the COVID-19 pandemic. How have you coped with the situation?
Well, COVID-19 is one of the most traumatic experiences I have ever had. I don't think I have experienced anything like this before. I can say so for myself and my family and people close to me. But we had to just keep moving. We had to do something. And we joined in the fight against it by producing reusable masks and other kinds of personal protective gear for medical workers.
How did you come to work for medical supplies in the first place?
Before the pandemic, the garment factory was already producing scrubs for hospitals and coveralls for engineering organizations as well. So we did have the expertise, but we were not producing masks per se at the time. So when, during this period, we just repurposed the factory to focus on producing masks. We increased our assembly lines and we were able to produce about 360-something masks and 60,000 coveralls and aprons.
Welcome back to the second part of Initiative Africa. I am here in Paris at the Cité de l'Architecture et du Patrimoine, where the Kinshasa Chronicles exhibition, which you can see behind me, is currently being showcased. As the year draws to a close, in Africa as elsewhere, violence continues to wreak havoc. Thefts, armed robberies, violence between rival gangs, this year was no exception to the multiplication of deaths. But in Tanzania, the authorities and civil society organizations have decided to take the matter into their own hands. Take a look.
A police officer and a bank official were shot dead by armed bank robbers in a shootout with police in Dar es Salaam, capital of Tanzania. It could be any city in the world, but it's still 2 more deaths because of illicit guns. Illicit guns kill about 500,000 people worldwide every year. These weapons are cheap, portable and readily available.
This one is a military weapon, highly dangerous to the public. It can carry 30 rounds of ammunition. It fires more or less the same like AK-47. It has got the same capabilities. It's a Makarov pistol. It's a Chinese made. There are plenty in our country.
Tanzania has had a relatively peaceful history through colonial times and into the era of independence. Today, the rate of violent crime and exposure to armed conflict is low by comparison with other East African countries. Yet recent official surveys suggested there were about 700,000 guns held by the civilian population. In some regions, it was reckoned that 24% of households held at least one firearm, particularly in border regions. Tanzania neighbours countries like Rwanda, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo and other countries with a troubled history.
Tanzania is not lucky enough to be an island. She's got 9 neighbours. Of the 9 neighbours, 8 of them are or were in conflict at one point in time. Some of them still are today.
Tanzania is a peaceful country. We had to agree receiving refugees, and these refugees came with firearms, and some did not declare them.
Tanzanians also have a cultural attachment to guns. Handcrafted, muzzle-loading guns have been used for ceremonial occasions since the 19th century here. Now, criminals are turning to local artisan gunsmiths for cheap and deadly weapons.
This is a modified shotgun, locally modified, and has the capability of firing ammunition of a modern shotgun.
For the last 50 years, the Great Lakes region of Africa has been at the centre of the proliferation of illegal guns. Illegal guns have fueled criminality and political instability and have crippled economic development here for decades. Peace and security is a precondition of development and growth.
Once there is insecurity, there's a lack of production, there's a lack of movement of people, there's a lack of movement of goods, and there's a general sort of deterioration of the economic well-being of that community.
On behalf of the Tanzania Police Force...
In the year 2000, the countries of the Horn of Africa and Great Lakes regions signed a declaration in Nairobi to tackle the problem of small arms. While the ambition is to eliminate and destroy illegal weapons, the proper registration and licensing system will allow for legal gun ownership. A feeling of insecurity is common in many rural areas, and farmers want a gun to protect themselves and their property.
He has been with his shotgun since 1975.
I want my gun to take care of my herd of cattle and to protect them from thieves. I need it to take care of my other property on the farm. We live here with many problems. There are monkeys, wild pigs, lions that might attack my cattle in the corral, and hyenas.
It is a common misconception internationally that you measure success by the number of firearms you have destroyed. So really, destroying or counting just numbers is not a game. What is important here is what have you done to stop the dysfunctions and prevent the dysfunction from happening again.
The arms management and disarmament plan in Tanzania has had significant success across the country. It's the first comprehensive national approach anywhere in the world and is being offered as an example for the region.
The civil society and law enforcement agencies are working together. Before it was not like that. The law enforcement agencies by themselves, they were not cooperating. Customs and police were different things. The police and the army were quarreling. Now it is together, they're working together. So it took us years, but we have managed. We have established that sort of cooperation.
In the region, the countries of the Great Lakes will have to address the proliferation and trafficking in small arms within their borders. And here's where the international community shares responsibility for making that happen.
Let's rediscover the analysis of our guests over the past few months to understand the news on the continent. Starting with the persistent terrorist attacks in the Sahel, Nyagali Bagayoko, expert on security issues and president of the African Security Network think tank, exposed a precise picture of this insurgency.
Could you give us a global picture of the security situation in the Sahel?
Alors, je pense qu'il est avant tout important.
Well, I think we need to approach the situation through the word complexity.
Parce qu'aujourd'hui, il est
because today it's very difficult to consider what's happening under a single prism, particularly under the single prism of the fight against terrorism,
de la lutte antiterroriste, qui est évidemment
which is obviously part of the landscape and the problem.
Aujourd'hui, on se trouve dans un environnement.
Today, we find ourselves in an environment which, in my opinion, can be described as insurrectionary in various respects. In other words, we are facing the proliferation of armed groups supporting different claims, causes, which could be related to jihadism indeed, but also irredentist or even pro-independence or separatist. Other groups which do not carry specific political claims, also, but which have been set up to ensure the security of the populations themselves, which results in the communitization of this security, and hence we are facing the proliferation of criminal groups. So the environment is extremely multifaceted. hence the difficulty in finding suitable answers to deal with them.
Who are these West African terrorists?
In my opinion, we need to consider the current threat as a combination of exogenous and endogenous variables. The origin of the crisis that erupted in North Mali in 2012 was expressed by the influence taken by the armed terrorist groups who had been pushed back into the Malian sanctuary from Algerian territory. The hairs behind the AIG, the Armed Islamic Group, and the SGPC, the Salafist group for preaching and combat, who have now converged under the Hakim banner, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. There was also, of course, an influence from the Libyan crisis and the collapse of the Muammar Gaddafi regime, which favored the return to the country of the Tuareg armed groups with rather nationalist demands. So we have these different types of actors united within the coalition called the GSIM, Group for Support of Islam and Muslims, which is led by Iyad al-Ghali, and which regroups a certain number of other formations, in particular the Katiba Machina in the center of Mali.
D'autres formations, notamment la Katiba du Massina dans le centre du Mali. Mais il y a également dans la région...
But there's also in the region another very influential group today, and against which the French army is fighting, which is the West African Sahara branch of the Islamic State, which has set up a province called ISWAP, the Islamic State in West Africa province, on which depend both ex-groups attached to Boko Haram, therefore in Nigeria, and in the regions of the Lake Chad Basin.
Province, dont dépendent à la fois les ex-éléments rattachés à Boko Haram, donc au Nigeria, et dans les régions...
And on the other hand, the Sahelian branch, which is embodied by the Islamic State in the Grand Sahara organization led by Abu Walid al-Sahrawi.
Dirigé par Abu Walid al-Sahrawi.
And we should not forget, of course, that the future of the continent relies also on equitable access to vaccines against COVID-19. We asked Dr. John Nengasong, Director of the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, for his opinion on the matter. He confided in Kumera Gameshu and even gave some tips to get through those difficult months. Timely advice. Listen to him. Are you keeping an eye on international research for a potential COVID-19 vaccine? Are you confident there won't be patent issues and the potential new vaccine would be accessible and affordable to all Africans?
That's a very good question. We are keeping an eye on vaccines under development and vaccines under trial. I think there are over 30 candidate vaccines that are out there being tested, but we have a long way to go. It will probably be more than 1 year before we have an effective vaccine. I want that to be very clear to all of us, that a vaccine is not going to be available in the next 3 months or 2 months then. Now, it brings us to the question of access. So if you have the vaccine, will Africa have access to those vaccines? We are also in discussions with these groups like the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Initiative, CEPI, to ensure that the issues of access are addressed upfront. So I think those questions are extremely pertinent for us, not just for vaccines, but for treatment as well.
Finally, what message do you have during these tough times for African viewers? What would be your advice to them?
My advice to our African viewers is that this is time for cooperation. This is time for coordination. Cooperation between the community and the public health authorities. The situation is going to get worse before it gets better. In order to come out of this crisis, which we will come out of it, we need close cooperation between the civil society, the communities, and the authorities and public health experts, without which it will be extremely difficult. It is a disease like any other disease. We have to work closely, do not stigmatize, do not discriminate people because of that. We will come out of this strong.
You were watching Initiative Africa. Well, that's it for the last edition of 2020. If you want to catch the show again, tune in on our social media channels and feel free to share, like and comment using the hashtag Initiative Africa TV show. Also, you can find all the replays of our previous shows on our website, africaonair.com, and we're back again in 2021 as from next week, same time, same channel with Business Africa, your appointment with the African economy. Until next year, keep safe and thanks for watching. Goodbye.